A red-haired man in a bath addresses a pink-haired baby as Elizabeth, who babbles in response. The baby, Elizabeth, reflects on her new life, where she can even receive rewards. She reveals that she has memories of a previous life as a blue-haired woman, which is why she wants this new life to last forever. In a flashback, a newborn baby with blue-green hair cries. She recalls that in her past life, before being summoned, she was known as Liz. In her past life, Liz studied hard in the kingdom of Altode, hoping for a family while learning of a power shift from the royal family. She read about the infamous Tyrant family, known for their blazing red hair. The family's war demon, Michael, was known for crushing rebellious nobles with sheer force. The femme fatale, Adelina, created arbitrary laws but also a merit-based system to recruit talented people. Reading about their history, Liz hoped to avoid their ruinous fate. She recalls entering the royal palace's government affairs office at age 15. Despite her position, she was immediately met with disrespect as papers were thrown in her face. As a commoner, she was treated unfairly, even while others discussed helping the poor. Her meal is disgustingly thrown on her head by a noble who complains about the food for lowly people. Another noble mocks her hunger, but Liz endures the humiliation. However, first Queen Claudia Altode, a revered figure, acknowledges Liz's suffering and expresses faith in her unique commoner's perspective. Queen Claudia gently comforts the tearful Liz, showing her kindness and support. Liz was eventually entrusted with her most important duty, managing the national treasure, the magic crystal. A sudden tension builds as a hand reaches for a door. Suddenly, a blonde girl with glowing eyes brandishes a dagger, and Liz watches in horror as the incident unfolds. The blonde girl raises an alarm, claiming a thief is trying to steal the magic crystal. The girl, revealed to be the queen's daughter, accuses Liz, who protests her innocence, but Queen Claudia dismisses her, regretting appointing a commoner. In a shocking betrayal, Liz is surrounded by royal guards, with swords drawn as the queen and her daughter look on. The queen's daughter proudly declares she has exposed a commoner who tried to steal the precious magic crystal. She orders the execution as Liz kneels, stunned by the injustice. With swords at her neck, Liz despairs, realizing even the wise queen she trusted has turned against her. Before a guillotine, a crowd roars for the criminal's execution. Watching from a carriage, two noble women remark that commoners are never rewarded for their efforts. Facing her doom, Liz realizes she cannot break the cycle of prejudice. Smack! Someone throws bread, striking her in the head. As the crowd jeers, she reflects on the cold reality that birth circumstances create gaps that can't be filled. With tears streaming down her face, she resigns to her fate, having no family to protect. In her final moments before the guillotine, she makes a desperate wish to any god that might be listening. A jolt runs through her as she sees a vision of a girl reaching toward a massive, glowing purple crystal. Waking with a heavy body and strange senses, she finds herself reborn. She looks at her tiny baby hands, confused and struggling to form words. She finds herself in an incredibly lavish and ornate room. As a baby with pink hair and bright green eyes, she takes in her new surroundings. Overwhelmed by her cute new form, she lets out a happy giggle. Her joy fades as she spots a family portrait and recognizes the signature red hair. Her eyes widen in terror as she identifies the red-haired man as Michael, the battlefield demon. Crash! The horrifying realization hits her. She's been reincarnated into the very Tyrant family whose ruin she read about. The story continues. A new chapter begins in the life of the tyrannical family's baby. She recalls her tragic end, executed as a traitor while the crowd cheered for her death. Now a pink-haired baby, Elizabeth sits up with a serious, determined expression. She gazes around the opulent room, stunned by the top-class furnishings of a noble home. Lying in a grand golden crib, she is surrounded by unimaginable luxury. The world looks completely different from her new, tiny perspective. Checking the family portrait again, she confirms her suspicion based on their shared hair color. Bam! Her terrifying realization is confirmed. She has been reborn into the infamous Tyrant family, the Waltzers. She recalls the family members: Michael Waltzer, the demon of the battlefield, his wife Adelina, the femme fatale, and their son. Their son Julius is revealed to be the current chancellor and the first queen's right hand. A dark memory reveals Julius ordering an execution as a queen lies fallen before him. Back in her crib, the baby shivers uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the horrifying knowledge. She tries to console herself, reasoning that since the tyrant couple is dead, the family has likely already fallen from power. Panic sets in as she realizes that despite her cries, no one is coming to care for her. A maid finally opens the door, her face unreadable as she stands silently in the doorway. The brown-haired maid stands over the crib, complaining that it's far too cold for the baby. As the annoyed maid looks on, the baby internally screams in frustration over the awful treatment. On the verge of tears, she laments that she expected to be cared for, but her diaper is still dirty. She fumes that even a disgraced noble family should be able to manage basic care for a baby. Sunlight streams through an ornate window, marking the passage of time. Fed up with the neglect, she decides she has hit her absolute limit. Pat, another maid, gently picks her up and pats her bottom comfortingly. As the maid pats her, she realizes it has been half a day with no food or drink. A baby bottle and a canister of formula sit untouched on a nearby table. A sudden flash of brilliant light emanates from the grand room. A jolt of energy flows through the room, catching her completely by surprise. As she's being held, she spots the first maid returning to the doorway. The maid silently contemplates the container of formula. Elizabeth watches as the maid takes the formula and walks away. The door clicks shut, leaving Elizabeth alone with a startling thought. Sweating with determination, she decides she must test the magical power she just felt. She recalls her previous life as Liz, where her lack of magic forced her to study spells obsessively. The baby tries to cast a simple flame spell, struggling to form the incantation. A massive, glowing purple magic circle erupts around her, its enormous power confirming her connection to the Tyrant family. She raises a tiny hand, feeling the immense magical energy swirling around it. Using her newfound power, she brings the bottle to her lips and happily declares it delicious. She observes that for now, her care is left entirely to the servants. After finishing her bottle, she lies alone in her crib, looking small and dejected. Drifting off to sleep, she resolves that she can manage to survive on her own. The red-haired man, Michael, appears before two maids, who report that there are no issues. The two maids tremble, overwhelmed by his terrifyingly powerful presence. His arrival is announced, identifying the imposing red-haired man as the, quote, demon of the battlefield. Full and content, the baby sleeps peacefully in her crib. The scene transitions, a promotional banner for the series. Warning message displayed. The red-haired man asks two maids if there's been any change, and they report that everything is proceeding smoothly. He looks over his shoulder with a sharp gaze, telling them there is no need for such reports. He decides he should probably check on the baby himself every once in a while. An exterior shot reveals the grand mansion is staffed by a large number of servants. A maid, identified as Servant B, thinks baby care is easy, but Elizabeth internally scoffs at the notion. Another maid muses that Servant B must like babies, but Elizabeth internally panics, realizing this is a misunderstanding. She realizes with dawning horror that each servant thinks someone else is taking care of her. She lies awake and alone in her golden crib, looking tiny in the vast, empty room. She concludes that if it weren't for her own adult mind, she would have already died from neglect. Her eyes snap open as a sudden, sharp jolt of awareness hits her. A chill runs down her spine as she senses a pair of icy eyes watching her from the doorway. The oppressive silence of the grand nursery is broken only by an unseen presence. A few hours later, Elizabeth wonders about the overwhelming presence of a mysterious man who only visits when she's alone. Her eyes snap open to see Michael watching from the doorway, and she panics, unsure of what to do. A few days pass, and a sudden burst of magical energy fills the nursery. Flaunting a pair of sunglasses, Elizabeth expertly uses her magic to enjoy her bottle. As she crawls, a strange, dark aura fills the room, prompting a new line of thought. She tries to greet him with a friendly "How are you?" but only manages to babble incoherently. Frustrated by her failed attempt to communicate, she realizes nothing she intended got through. From the doorway, Michael quietly watches his daughter, a gentle light surrounding him. Peeking over some flowers, Elizabeth flashes an irresistibly cute and happy smile. Her smile vanishes as she stands in her crib, intimidated by her father, Michael, looming over her. His intense gaze is so terrifying that it sends a shiver of fear right through her. A large hand gently pats her head, and she looks up in wide-eyed, innocent surprise. With a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, the red-haired man turns and walks away. As Michael quickly departs, the brown-haired maid enters the room, looking confused by the sudden movement. Elizabeth panics, thinking her secret visitor is about to be discovered. Tisk! The maid angrily grips the crib, her expression full of annoyance. As the maid lunges for her, Elizabeth realizes she can't use her magic and cries out, but a hand suddenly stops the attack. Michael furiously confronts the maid about her intentions, striking her and demanding she answer for her actions as Elizabeth watches. Holding the terrified maid by her collar, Michael's cold glare promises punishment. Standing over the cowering maid and the spilled formula, he menacingly asks if this is how she attends to his daughter. Alone in her crib, Elizabeth watches the tense confrontation from a distance. Michael draws his sword, accusing the maid of filing false reports, and she begs for her life as he prepares to execute her. The red-haired man pauses, his thoughts interrupted by an unexpected sound. Horrified that he might actually kill her, Elizabeth frantically babbles, trying to stop her father. The tense standoff continues, with Michael's sword at the maid's throat as Elizabeth looks on. With tears welling in her big green eyes, she desperately pleads for him to stop. Michael is visibly stunned by his baby daughter's emotional outburst. A dark-haired male servant rushes into the room, snapping to attention and awaiting orders. Now held in her father's arms, Elizabeth lets out a soft coo, finally calling him father in her thoughts. Her brief moment of peace shatters as she realizes, with horror, that the tyrant Michael Walzer is still alive. The truth dawns on her. She hasn't been reborn after the family's fall, but in the past, right before it. Staring at the family portrait, she accepts her terrible fate as a doomed child of the Tyrant family. The scene transitions to a bright, clear day, marking a new beginning. Another maid asks if something is wrong, while Elizabeth processes that the family she once admired is doomed to fall. A new, kind maid named Servant C gives her warm milk, but Elizabeth still feels no peace of mind. While holding Elizabeth, the maid mentions that Lady Adelina will be appointed Chancellor next month. Elizabeth panics, realizing that, according to history, the family falls 1 year after Adelina's appointment, giving her a life expectancy of 1 year. Her eyes burn with determination as she vows that she will not let that future happen. Recalling her tragic execution as Liz, she steels herself, refusing to go through that despair again. With her fist clenched, she embraces her new reality. She is the only one who knows the future. A promotional banner for the Scanlation team is displayed. Warning message displayed. Following the incident, the nursery is shown to have been thoroughly cleaned. In a fresh pink dress, Elizabeth celebrates her newly cleaned and safe environment with a joyous cheer. Bam! A powerful sound effect marks a sudden shift in her mood. Her joyful expression is replaced by one of fierce and adorable determination. Now, her one and only mission is to figure out how a baby can prevent the downfall of the Tyrant family. She reflects that while she studied hard in her past life, she failed at human relationships, a mistake she cannot afford to repeat. Michael's piercing green eyes glint as he silently observes his daughter from the shadows. Staring back at her father, Elizabeth is frozen with fear, thinking his face is truly terrifying. Michael looms over the crib, his powerful aura radiating immense pressure as Elizabeth hesitates. She recalls that it wasn't a tyrant but her father who saved her, letting out a small babble. Elizabeth flashes a brilliant, cute smile, and her father, Michael, is caught off guard by the charming display. Her charm offensive fails as his terrifying aura returns, leaving her to lament her miserable failure. Refusing to be stopped by fear, she mentally resolves to switch tactics and push forward with her plan. To survive, she knows she must turn Tyrant Michael into an ally, even if it means manipulating her own father. A title card appears with a flourish, officially kicking off Operation Daddy-Daughter Bonding. As her first step, Elizabeth wraps herself in a magical shield to withstand her father's overwhelming aura. Recalling moments of his quiet care, she starts to wonder if she has misunderstood his intentions all along. Her suspicion grows as she pictures him holding a cute yellow dress and a pink stuffed bunny for her. She realizes it's his aura that scares everyone away, from babies to animals, much to her frustration. The nearby maid muses that it looks like a normal parent-child chat, while Elizabeth wishes he'd just be gentle. After the maid suggests Elizabeth likes him, Michael furiously yells at the startled servant, while Elizabeth internally begs him to calm down. Elizabeth looks at her father, a flicker of hope and affection appearing in her thoughts. She looks up with wide, pleading eyes, putting on her most innocent and adorable expression. Her father gently offers her a stuffed bunny, a silent peace offering. Hugging the new toy, Elizabeth thinks that at the very least, he seems to be trying. As the maid wonders about bathing and feeding her, Michael gets a dark look of realization, terrifying Elizabeth. With a wild grin, Michael enthusiastically declares that he will be the one to bathe his daughter. The maid nervously tries to explain that a bath isn't necessary thanks to magical cleansing tools. Elizabeth is left utterly speechless and horrified by this unexpected development. Seeing Elizabeth's apparent excitement, a stunned Michael and a resigned maid agree that it's bath time. In the bathroom, Michael holds Elizabeth aloft like a trophy, much to the maid's horror. Well, that's one way to start a bath. The maid bravely scolds him for scaring the baby, and Elizabeth marvels at the maid's courage. Following the maid's instructions, Michael awkwardly adjusts his hold, surprising Elizabeth with the sudden closeness. Snuggled against him, Elizabeth is amazed by how perfectly she fits against his abs, finding them surprisingly comfortable. She marvels at the incredible stability of being held in her father's strong arms. Michael carries his daughter towards the large, sunlit bathtub, ready to begin. Peeking over his shoulder, Elizabeth gets a glimpse of the bath products waiting for her. Seeing the supermint and refreshing and exciting bottles, she panics and internally screams for a servant to save her. Back in her crib, the maid looks on with relief as a traumatized Elizabeth thinks she somehow survived the ordeal. A title card frames the chaotic memory, ironically titled, A Cozy Father-Daughter Bath Time. After the bath, the maid tries to feed Elizabeth, who refuses her milk due to a bloated, uncomfortable tummy. Elizabeth suddenly goes limp with discomfort, and the panicked maid rushes to get help. Feeling a sharp pain, Elizabeth wonders what's happening as she lies helpless in her crib. A brilliant, golden magic circle erupts from Elizabeth, filling the entire room with overwhelming power. Slam Michael bursts through the doorway, shouting his daughter's name in alarm as he sees the blinding light. He rushes to the crib, where he and the maid find the source of the commotion. The magical light has vanished, leaving only a peacefully sleeping Elizabeth in its wake. Michael and the maid watch the sleeping baby, both looking concerned and confused by what just happened. He orders the shaken maid to call a doctor just in case, and she immediately agrees. Alone now, Michael stands watch over his daughter's crib, a silent and protective guardian. In a stunning turn of events, a blue-haired woman wakes up, realizing with a shock that she's back in her old body. A promotional banner for the Scanlation team is displayed. The blue-haired woman, Liz, now sits by the golden crib, watching the sleeping baby Elizabeth inside. Liz leans over the crib, her expression a mix of confusion and concern as she looks at the baby. Wondering why she's back in her old form, Liz gently pokes the baby's forehead, triggering a soft magical glow. Her consciousness returns to her baby body, and Elizabeth wonders how she turned back, letting out a confused babble. With a determined glint in her eyes, baby Elizabeth forces a slight, strained smile. The scene shifts to Liz's blue-haired adult form, floating gracefully near the golden crib. Looking down at her own sleeping infant form, Liz confirms that her baby self is peacefully asleep. A purple magical aura surrounds her hand as Liz realizes her powers are now with this adult form. Pop Liz comically appears from a cloud of smoke, wondering if this explains her sudden materialization. Leaning over the crib, Liz theorizes that if someone touches the sleeping baby, it might trigger a reaction. Bam! Just as predicted, baby Elizabeth wakes with a start, leading Liz to recall that magic can misfire when it builds up. Elizabeth realizes she hasn't used magic recently, which might be the cause of the sudden magical outburst. Her father Michael bursts in, shouting her name, and Elizabeth looks up at him with a happy coo. A reflection in a mirror reveals an elderly doctor and a brown-haired woman accompanying Michael. The elderly doctor looks grave as he anxiously asks about Elizabeth's condition. Michael furiously orders the doctor to hurry the examination, while Elizabeth pities the terrified old man. As Michael comically explodes with a nosebleed from stress, Elizabeth tries to project that she's perfectly fine. While the doctor nervously examines a worried Elizabeth, her father collapses dramatically in the background. The doctor declares Elizabeth to be in good health, but Michael reacts with furious disbelief. Michael angrily confronts the doctor about the maid's report, and Elizabeth fears for the old man's life. To de-escalate the situation, Elizabeth decides to do something embarrassing and musters all her baby strength. Reaching out with her tiny hands, she manages to babble a word toward her father. A close-up shows Elizabeth's blushing, determined face as she tries to get her father's attention. She silently pleads for him to pay attention to her, and his fierce expression softens instantly. Michael gently scoops his daughter up, holding her close to his chest. Held safely in his arms, Elizabeth realizes her stomach ache was simply due to an excess of magic. She scrunches her face in concentration, and a powerful pink aura begins to glow around her. With a great strain, she focuses her power. Poof! In a puff of magical smoke, her adult form, Liz, appears once again. Stretching her arms, Liz feels she's finally getting the hang of manifesting this magical body. She approaches a large, ornate mirror to inspect her new form. Touching her cheek, she notices her complexion is healthier, and she seems a bit plumper. A confident smile spreads across her face as she realizes this form gives her more options to save the family. Looking at her simple brown dress, she decides a change of clothes is in order. With a flash of magic, she transforms her dress into a proper black and white maid's uniform. Admiring her reflection, she delights in the fact that her magical body allows for instant costume changes. She pauses, thoughtfully considering her next move. With a final touch, she adjusts her hair into a neat bun, completing her disguise. Peeking from the doorway with a sly grin, she sets off to explore the mansion. Liz happily wanders the grand halls, singing a little song about exploring the noble's mansion. She enjoys a moment of peace, smiling contentedly under a large tree on a bright, sunny day. A promotional banner for the Scanlation team is displayed. Now walking down a long, elegant corridor, Liz notes that she possesses all 5 senses in this form. She continues her survey of the seemingly endless, opulent manor. Mentally exhausted by the sheer size of the place, she slumps to the floor, nicknaming herself Tired Z. Her attention is suddenly caught by a maid carrying a tray on a nearby balcony. Seeing the delicious-looking sandwich and tea, Liz smells the nice scent and correctly guesses it's for her father. Bingo! As a voice from behind a door grants the maid entry, Liz pumps her fist in triumph. Inside the office, Michael is seen hard at work, writing at a desk piled high with documents. As the maid enters and apologizes, Michael's intimidating purple aura flares up, startling her. While biting into a sandwich, Michael commands the terrified maid to report on Elizabeth's condition in detail. He mentally lists the specifics he wants to know, but then dismisses the maid, saying her report won't be necessary. While Liz panics as she magically senses her father is on his way just as he leaves his office. The maid offers her deepest apologies as Michael's intimidating purple aura flares silently from his desk. Taking a bite of a sandwich, Michael commands a detailed report on Elizabeth, leaving the maid stunned by his intensity. As he mentally lists his concerns, the maid offers to check, but he abruptly dismisses her, saying it won't be necessary as he stands. While Liz panics as she magically senses her father approaching her room. In a frenzy, she desperately wonders what she should do now that he's on his way. Michael steps out of his office, opening the large double doors into the grand hallway. He pauses, sensing magical waves in the air and wondering about their mysterious origin. A cute pink-haired character appears in a whimsical thought bubble, pondering the complex situation. A stark warning flashes, demanding the reader's attention to the proper source before the tale continues. With determined strides, Michael walks down the hallway and firmly grasps the handle to his daughter's door. He enters the room and stands over the golden crib, looking down at the pink-haired baby Elizabeth. Beaming, baby Elizabeth happily introduces herself, her thoughts filled with a joyful image of her mother. A powerful beam of magic erupts from her hand as she loses control. The magical backlash sends Liz flying backward, crashing hard against a wall. She hurtles past her father's blurry figure in the hallway. Tumbling through the air, Liz falls helplessly down the grand hall. Back in her crib, baby Elizabeth sighs with relief, having made it back to her infant body just in time. Michael offers another bath, and Elizabeth is instantly horrified by a flood of traumatic memories from the last one. Wondering why things are getting so busy, Elizabeth recalls her father in his office and questions his role. She looks at him, pondering why he seems to be shouldering all the work by himself. She realizes the mansion has far too few servants, recalling how empty it was when she explored as Liz. Michael gently lifts his daughter from the crib. Holding her close, he quietly asks if she is not afraid of him. Elizabeth babbles, thinking she isn't scared, even as her father asks if she fears the hands that have killed. She smiles, thinking that his actions were necessary and couldn't be helped. A memory flashes of her father as a knight, sword dripping with blood, standing over a fallen enemy. She concludes that if he sacrificed himself for the nation, he wasn't the only one to do so. Michael looks down at the baby in his arms, taken aback and wondering what he's even saying. Elizabeth gazes up at him with wide, innocent eyes, her expression full of trust. She burrows into his chest, snuggling safely against him. The baby looks up at her father's face with a curious and content expression. As the maid smiles in the background, Michael glances at her and dismisses his thoughts. The maid admits she was just thinking he's become quite good at caring for the young lady. A sly smile crosses Elizabeth's face as she thinks to herself that it's a simple task. The maid recalls a time when Michael practiced by holding a cushion, only to crush it with his strength. Michael looks away slightly, responding with a simple, "Very well." Curled up on a pillow, baby Elizabeth drifts off into a peaceful sleep. In her adult form, Liz stands alone, surrounded by ethereal spirits, her expression now serious and determined. Liz worries her plans will fail if her father is too busy, jeopardizing their future. But then a new thought strikes her. Bathed in a radiant light, she has a brilliant idea. Now, in her maid uniform, Liz considers how odd it is for the Knight Commander to be stationed at home full-time. She clenches her fist, complaining that if it were her, she could finish all that paperwork in a flash. She walks purposefully down the long, empty hall, a new plan forming. She stops abruptly, realizing with a jolt that she is right here and able to help. A hand elegantly holds a quill, poised to begin writing on a blank document. Disguised as a maid, Liz sits at the desk and diligently completes the paperwork so her father only needs to sign. Her imagination conjures a sparkly, grateful Michael, who thinks her help is super useful. The real Michael returns to his office, looking at the completed paperwork with a deeply puzzled expression. He sits at his desk by the warm fire, continuing to study the mysterious, finished document. Peeking through a window, Liz believes her plan will grant her more quality time with her father. Seen through the window pane, Liz smiles with satisfaction, confident in her scheme. In a quiet room, a young, red-haired man looks down with a pensive expression, thinking he has to come up with a plan. In a state of pure bliss, baby Elizabeth rests peacefully on her father's chest as he sleeps. Snuggled warmly against her father, Elizabeth sighs contentedly, thinking it feels incredibly good. Looking up with a knowing smile, Elizabeth credits her comfort to her magic and memories from her past life. Elizabeth imagines her father's overwhelming presence intimidating two maids, thinking it's more than just magic. While Michael holds his sleeping daughter, he resolves to increase the knight's training, while Elizabeth mentally cheers them on. Michael asks his daughter if she's met him yet, and a confused Elizabeth babbles, wondering who he means. Wah! A sudden realization strikes Elizabeth. Engrossed with her father, she completely forgot about the other survivor of their distant family. A title card dramatically introduces the ruthless Julius Waltzer, a red-haired young man, as Elizabeth thrashes in panic. A purple-haired mascot character for the Scanlation team appears in a thought bubble. A promotional banner is displayed, hiring for translation and editing positions. A stark yellow warning is shown, directing readers to the official website. A group of nobles whispers as the young, red-haired Julius Waltzer walks past them down a hall. A black-haired aide informs Julius that His Excellency will not be attending sword training, causing Julius to flinch. Julius turns to his aide and asks what happened, but the man hesitates to give a reason. A close-up shows Julius's wide, golden eyes, his expression one of utter shock. Being fed a bottle, Elizabeth realizes her father is so obsessed with her that he has forgotten all about Julius. Or, she considers, perhaps her father's intimidating presence simply scares everyone else away. Elizabeth envisions a future where Julius Waltzer, the future chancellor, helps her father with his mountain of work. Held securely, Elizabeth looks on with a determined, sparkling gaze, her new plan taking shape. She recalls that Julius, once the first princess's right hand, always wore a doll-like expression. She remembers the popular rumor that he was handsome and only ever responded to Lady Claudia, the savior queen. A past life memory shows Liz watching as Julius stands, with his entourage of followers. She recalls his ice-cold gaze as he dismissed her, a mere civil official, for having a small presence. Kneeling before other officials, a young Julius laments the state of the royal court. Liz clenches her fist in frustration, thinking back on how he'd call her a commoner and concluding he was an awful person. Baby Elizabeth thrashes about in her crib, annoyed by the memory of Julius. She ponders if the only thing Julius and her father have in common is their red hair. In a flashback, Liz remembers secretly memorizing noble profiles at the palace, though it led to her being bullied. Elizabeth recalls that Julius entered the palace at age 12, a fact she now realizes is far too young. With a determined glint in her eye, she concludes there must be a serious reason for him to have started so early. She remembers that it was her father who insisted on starting weekly sword lessons for Julius. Hearing that his lesson is rescheduled for baby Elizabeth, Julius clenches his fist in disbelief, finding the notion impossible. "Impossible," he yells, ordering his carriage prepared and storming off to the Waltzer estate. Outside in the garden, Michael asks the maid if getting sunlight is all right, and she confirms it's important, while a happy Elizabeth looks on. Michael's attention is caught by a carriage approaching the estate gates, and he wonders who the visitor could be. He notes that he wasn't expecting any visitors today, while Elizabeth looks on with a puzzled expression. The maid offers to investigate the arrival, but Michael declines, stating that the carriage is already heading their way. A frantic Julius leaps from the carriage shouting "Father," which startles Elizabeth and makes her flinch. Suddenly bursting into tears, Elizabeth panics, realizing she's just a baby and can't control her startled reaction. The maid rushes away in a fluster. Michael holds his crying daughter as a frustrated Julius clutches his head, vexed by the situation. The tense standoff continues as Michael comforts Elizabeth, with the maid and a distraught Julius watching. Julius nervously stammers, trying to address his father. Michael coldly orders Julius to go back, leaving the young man looking shocked and hurt. As Julius turns to leave, a wide-eyed Elizabeth looks from her father's arms, finally realizing this is him. Elizabeth tugs on her father's shirt, and when the maid asks what's wrong, she thinks about wanting a nap in her room. Michael hands Elizabeth over to the maid, who understands and accepts the baby. Watching Julius leave, Elizabeth notes his hurt expression, believing her father doesn't actually hate him. Held in her father's arms, baby Elizabeth closes her eyes and smiles with serene contentment. The scene shifts to a quiet, sunlit garden with an ornate fountain, signaling a moment of calm. Dejected, Julius sits huddled alone against a wall, his posture radiating sadness and defeat. A tear rolls down Julius's cheek as he looks down, his golden eyes filled with sorrow. Disguised as a maid, Liz approaches Julius with a gentle and reassuring smile, surrounded by ethereal white roses. With a kind expression, the blue-haired maid asks Julius if he is all right. Startled and teary-eyed, Julius looks up defensively and demands to know who is there. Julius furiously denies crying, claiming something was in his eye, while Liz internally gushes over how adorable he is. Liz finds it hard to believe this beautiful boy will become such a cold person, lamenting what a shame it is. A blushing Julius looks up in alarm, realizing the maid has been watching him cry. The two sit quietly side by side in a field of daisies, a moment of peace settling between them. They continue to sit together in the serene garden, the silence stretching on. Leaning in close, Liz suddenly proposes they make a plan, startling a confused Julius. Liz cheerfully announces her grand idea, the super operation, best buddies parent and child, leaving Julius utterly stunned. A brief interlude passes before the story continues. Another short pause builds anticipation for the next scene. Now sitting back to back with their arms crossed, Liz and Julius both look equally annoyed. Liz insists they lay out a plan, but Julius questions why she is being so sudden. Liz excitedly dubs her plan the Super BFF parent and child operation, much to Julius's continued bewilderment. Julius looks at her incredulously, questioning the ridiculous name she came up with. Pointing her finger, Liz retorts by asking if he's even an adult. Her question catches Liz off guard, causing her to blush and stammer in response. Liz snaps, calling Julius out for acting tough after crying, thinking he's a spoiled and uncute tyrant. Julius calmly asks her to explain her plan, and after a moment's hesitation, Liz agrees to elaborate. As Julius smirks, Liz internally fumes at his insolent tone, concluding that a tyrant's son is truly a tyrant. Julius notices Liz's strained expression and asks what's wrong, but she's too busy fighting her frustration. Liz clutches her head, internally screaming that he is still being incredibly insolent. The scene shows Michael and Julius in separate, silent moments of deep, unspoken thought. At a tense dinner, Elizabeth sits in her high chair and finds the suffocating atmosphere unbearable. Julius formally informs his father that he will be returning to the academy the following day. Michael barely acknowledges him, simply replying, "I see," before taking another bite of his meal. Julius adds that he won the sword-fighting tournament, but his father's response is the same cold dismissal. A wide-eyed Elizabeth looks on, her expression a mixture of shock and concern at the cold interaction. Liz realizes her praise means nothing, just as a distraught Elizabeth begins to wail. Julius makes a final attempt to connect, asking his father to go deer hunting with him. As Michael turns away, Elizabeth panics, thinking the servants can care for her just fine. In a burst of defiance, Julius declares he will hunt the deer by himself. Holding a sleeping Elizabeth, Michael coolly tells Julius that his efforts will not be necessary. Tucked in bed, Elizabeth fumes in frustration, wondering why her father gives her nothing to work with. The next phase is revealed as Operation 3, but Julius throws a tantrum, refusing to act childlike to get attention. Liz tries to convince Julius to try, but then remembers the harsh reality of the House of Walzer. Her eyes harden with resolve as she thinks that in this house, indulgence is not permitted. Liz reflects that her father is the tyrant head of a tyrant household, making a normal bond impossible. Realizing a normal family life is too much to hope for, Liz sadly apologizes to a distant Julius. Julius walks away, resolving not to be swayed by the maid and dismissing his father's affection as a whim. He clenches his fist, determined to earn his father's acknowledgement through hard work and real results. Gazing at a grand hall, Julius vows to achieve more and grow strong like his father. He grips his sword with bruised hands, ready to forge his own path, to earn his father's respect. Just as he stills his resolve, Liz's voice cuts in, suggesting a pick-me-up and hug-me operation, startling him. Annoyed, the blue-haired maid insists she has other plans too, as Julius looks on. Julius bluntly calls her a strange one, causing the maid to blush in utter shock. The maid internally fumes, thinking he is incredibly cheeky for calling her strange. Blushing with a shy smile, Julius thinks this is much better than seeing him cry. The maid watches him, smiling to herself as she concludes seeing him happy is better. A promotional banner for the Scanlation team is displayed as Julius walks away down a grand hallway. Walking with steely determination, Julius thinks the time has finally come to use that. He recalls honing a special technique with his academy instructors, confident he can unleash it at any time. As a stream of purple magic flows toward the sleeping baby Elizabeth, Julius prepares to use his special technique. Julius leans over the crib, happy to find Elizabeth awake, and covers his face to play peekaboo, baffling the baby. He pops up with a cheerful boo, delighting Elizabeth, who bursts into a happy laugh. As Julius plays with a happy Elizabeth, their father, Michael, appears in the doorway and ominously asks what is happening. Michael menacingly grabs Julius's shoulder, his expression furious as he demands to know what he's doing. Julius nervously explains it is a trick his teachers at the academy taught him to make babies laugh. Michael silently observes his son before covering his own face to play peekaboo, making Elizabeth gasp in anticipation. With a thunderous boo, Michael unleashes a wave of energy so powerful it sends both Julius and Elizabeth flying. As they tumble backward, Julius spots a flying pink bunny toy and shouts for Elizabeth to watch out. In a desperate dive, Julius manages to catch Elizabeth mid-air just before she hits the ground. Clutching Elizabeth, Julius feels relief, while Elizabeth internally panics about her near-death experience. Julius then apologizes to his father. Julius tries to take the blame, but Elizabeth thinks it's not his fault, as the move is only dangerous when their father does it. Michael places a hand on his son's shoulder, and a tearful Julius looks up at him. Michael instructs Julius that he must protect his sister, and a determined Julius eagerly agrees. As Julius lovingly holds his little sister, Elizabeth gazes up at him with a bright, happy smile. A blushing Julius is struck by an arrow of affection as he holds the sleeping baby Elizabeth close. A thought bubble declares that despite the unforeseen chaos, the mission was a smashing success. The maid tells a flustered Julius not to worry about the details, adding that they also grew closer. She cheerfully suggests he drop his plans to move to the palace, since they are already bonding at the manor. Julius turns away, looking troubled and deep in thought after her suggestion. Julius confronts the maid, demanding to know how she knew about his palace invitation when he hasn't even told his father. He recalls her suspicious behavior from the start, as she struggles to come up with an excuse. His eyes widen in sudden realization, and he accuses her of being a spy. Panicked, the maid vehemently denies the accusation, realizing she has made a huge mistake. She is internally shocked, unable to believe Julius kept his palace invitation a secret from their father. In a moment of sheer panic, the maid blurts out her true identity. "I'm Elizabeth." Julius stares back at her, completely speechless and bewildered by her impossible claim. A promotional banner is displayed, hiring for translation and editing positions. Julius shouts, "Elizabeth," in a state of utter disbelief and confusion. The maid stands awkwardly before a still confused Julius after her startling confession. Julius is still processing her words, only managing a confused "huh" as he stares at her. Liz clutches her head, panicking about what she just said, as Julius asks what she's talking about. Julius sighs, asking her to clarify what she means by claiming to be Elizabeth. Liz laughs nervously, trying to play it off as a joke she doesn't remember making. Julius threatens to report her as an intruder, prompting a desperate Liz to grab him and plead for a chance to explain. Liz looks down, realizing that even if she explains the truth, he probably won't believe her anyway. Julius grabs her chin and furiously demands an explanation, causing her to yelp in fear. Julius challenges her to prove her claim right there, and looking at the sleeping baby, Liz confidently says she can. Liz decides it will be faster to show him rather than explain, trusting that he is kind enough to listen. As the maid leans over the crib, a shocked Julius shouts at her to stop. "What are you going to do to Elizabeth?" Julius cries out as a brilliant light envelops the two of them. A close-up shows baby Elizabeth peeking over the side of her crib with a bright, knowing smile. Baby Elizabeth babbles that she's right here, leaving a confused Julius wondering what just happened. As Julius leans in, the baby insists that Liz is Elizabeth, prompting him to question her name. A chibi Julius asks if she can change back into her previous form, and a smiling Elizabeth happily obliges. Whoa! Julius watches in shock as the blue-haired maid Liz emerges from a bright light above the crib. With the transformation complete, baby Elizabeth now lies sleeping peacefully in her crib. Liz explains that her body is made from Elizabeth's magic and asks Julius if he understands now. Liz internally notes his bossy tone, remembering that Julius was just like this in her past life. In a flashback, a stern, older Julius forces a weary Liz to work through the night over paperwork. Julius agrees to listen to her story, and Liz prepares to tell him, though she warns it's a long one. The two stand together as Liz begins to explain the unbelievable truth. Liz continues her explanation, gesturing forward as she recounts the events of her past life. Julius quickly grasps the concept of her having memories from a future life, impressing Liz with his sharp intellect. Liz cheerfully praises her genius big brother, confirming he is correct and acknowledging his reputation as an academy prodigy. Julius recalls an ancient text about a wizard who foresaw the future and created a duplicate body, theorizing that they too were reborn from a future life. Liz internally acknowledges there's a secret about Julius she can't tell him, recalling a discovery from the archives. In her past life, she found a document marked for disposal, revealing that Tyrant Michael once entered the demon forest alone. A flashback shows Michael surrounded by countless magic beasts, abandoned with no hope of reinforcements. When his strength gave out, the only thing he managed to secure was a magic crystal, fated to become a national treasure. He offered this crystal to the royal family, an achievement that single-handedly allowed Julius, a child of a fallen house, to become chancellor. Back in the present, a smiling Julius looks at Liz, now understanding her situation. Determined to protect him, Liz internally vows she can't reveal the truth about their father's sacrifice. Julius looks on, slightly surprised by her sudden emotional shift. A determined Julius thinks that making choices to strengthen his father is all that matters, as Liz watches with concern. Julius smiles, content with his new resolve to support his father no matter what. Liz feels a sense of hope, believing that with her brother now on her side, the tragic future she remembers can be avoided. She recalls the terrible vision of Michael fighting alone against a horde of magical beasts. Liz believes that even if something bad happens, everything will be fine as long as Julius stands by their father's side. Startled, Liz and Julius both turn their attention toward a portrait hanging on the wall. A different maid enters the room, and Julius turns toward the sound of her arrival, asking her to excuse them. Lying in her crib once more, baby Elizabeth looks up and thinks, "Boo?" Julius urgently tells Liz that boo is not an answer, and that their father is waiting for them. As Julius tends to the crib, Liz internally agrees, ready to face their father. Suddenly, their father Michael appears, remarking on Julius's deep concern for Elizabeth. Michael silently picks up the sleeping baby Elizabeth from her crib. Elizabeth peeks open an eye, relieved that her father doesn't seem to have noticed her secret. Julius watches with a relieved smile, thinking that, thank goodness, they got away with it. Michael stands holding Elizabeth, looking expectantly at his son Julius. Michael commands Julius to accompany them, and a smiling Julius immediately agrees. Tucked in her crib, Elizabeth is relieved, thinking that her brother can finally talk to their father normally now. A maid approaches with a bottle, internally trembling at how scary Michael's aura is. As she drinks her milk, Elizabeth thinks about how easily she can now enter her dream world. The sweet baby Elizabeth looks up contentedly. A warning message is displayed regarding the Scanlation website. In his study, Michael works at a desk piled high with papers as Julia stands beside him. Liz's plan, Operation Bonding with Father, is to help with work, and Julius thoughtfully considers the idea. Michael remarks that it's more efficient to use the knights for their strength than their minds, while Julius agrees they've reduced the nearby magic beasts. Julius clarifies that the knight's duty is a separate matter from his own responsibilities. A chibi Julius cheerfully thinks that taking a little break shouldn't be a problem. Julius's expression turns serious as he adds they could only rest until next month's inauguration. In his study, Michael thinks about next month's inauguration ceremony, where a woman named Adelina Valtizer is set to be named. As Michael considers that Adelina will become the new chancellor, a maid bursts in to interrupt them. The flustered maid urgently tries to tell them something is wrong with the young lady, catching both Michael and Julius's attention. In her crib, a thoughtful baby Elizabeth considers the royal palace. Lying with her bunny toy, Elizabeth continues her thought, stating that, honestly, she doesn't want to go. Elizabeth recalls the terrifying face of First Queen Claudia, the one who killed her, and trembles in fear. A flashback introduces Lady Adelina, a brilliant woman who rose to prominence based on talent, not status. Adelina was a woman of firm justice who never tolerated corruption among the nobles. Her principled actions and the people who admired her meant something significant for her future. It meant she was despised by the nobility, as she had purged nearly all corrupt high-ranking officials. Elizabeth recalls that though Lady Adelina was called an evil woman, it was thanks to her that she, an orphan, could survive. Back in the present, the maid explains to a concerned Michael and Julius that the young lady has been like this all morning. A chorus of butterflies surrounds baby Elizabeth as she happily sings, causing Julius to wonder if she's really singing. Struck by a bolt of realization, a shocked Michael shouts, "No way! Is Elizabeth a genius?" Whap! Michael swiftly scoops up the baby, who is now peacefully held in his arms as her toy tumbles through the air. The next month, as Michael leaves the room, a determined maid clenches her fist, ready for their trip to the royal palace. The family stands together in their formal attire, ready for their visit to the palace. A blushing Elizabeth, held by her father, is completely starstruck by his impressive knight uniform. A magnificent royal carriage, pulled by 4 white horses, begins its journey. Inside the carriage, Michael warns Julius to be careful at the palace, while Elizabeth notes the magical contracts mean even new servants are trustworthy. Elizabeth reflects that the real issue was never about working, recalling a vision of her alternate self, Liz, imprisoned. A line of opulent carriages makes its way toward the grand royal palace. A pristine white boot steps firmly onto a red carpet, marking their arrival. The family, accompanied by a new maid, disembarks from their carriage. A close-up reveals Elizabeth's worried expression as she thinks, "Still?" The palace feels nostalgic, but Elizabeth still trembles with fear as her father carries her. Michael asks if she needs a diaper, but an indignant Elizabeth shouts, "No!" A palace attendant leads the family down a corridor, announcing that Lady Adelina Valtzer's office is this way. Looking back down the hall, Elizabeth realizes she never visited this area in her life as Liz. Michael calls out to Adelina, who turns and is surprised to see him holding a thing. As the blue-haired woman holds a bundle, Elizabeth immediately notices the dark circles under her eyes. Elizabeth's internal monologue continues, observing Adelina's haggard face and lifeless hair with concern. A teary-eyed Elizabeth recognizes Adelina as a typical overworked person, just like she was in her past life. Michael advises the woman she should rest, and Elizabeth thinks even a tyrant like her father would show concern. Adelina dismisses his concern with a smile, while Elizabeth is shocked to hear her think that Michael is a muscle monster with inhuman stamina. Julius addresses the woman as mother, urging her not to push herself, and she gratefully thanks him. As her mother reviews a document, Elizabeth realizes this is not what she imagined at all. Elizabeth wonders if false rumors were spread about her mother. But more importantly, there's another pressing question. With a cold expression, Adelina asks Michael why he brought that to her office. Michael calmly explains he's been caring for the baby, prompting a shocked reaction from Adelina. Julius defends his sister, but his mother angrily declares that's exactly why he shouldn't bring Elizabeth near her, leaving Michael speechless. Elizabeth recalls her efforts to bond with her father and brother, all to protect her family. A tearful Elizabeth is heartbroken that after everything she's done, she is hated by her own mother. She despairs that her mother despises her so much she refuses to even say her name as Adelina glares down with contempt. A promotional banner is displayed, hiring for translation and editing positions. A furious Adelina screams for them to take that thing away from her immediately. Julius looks on in utter shock, murmuring, "Mother," as Michael watches grimly. Crushed, Elizabeth realizes she is truly hated by her mother, who won't even speak her name. Michael looks down, his expression somber and filled with unspoken sorrow. Michael hands Elizabeth to the maid, explaining he must attend to the knight's order before the ceremony begins. As Michael and Julius turn to leave, a wide-eyed Elizabeth panics, wondering if they are truly abandoning her. A furious Adelina stops them, demanding they take the child with them, a command Elizabeth silently cheers for. Michael turns back, his expression unreadable, as the family is brought back together at the office doorway. With Elizabeth now in a nearby basket, an exhausted Adelina slumps over her desk, prompting Liz to think her mother is the one who truly deserves to weep. Elizabeth has a sudden realization that Adelina's own mother must despise her, just as Adelina coldly orders the maid not to move the baby's basket. The maid meekly agrees, appalled that Adelina treats her own child like an inconvenient object. Surveying the office, Elizabeth's eyes land on a mysterious, glowing object resting on a stack of papers. As a different maid leaves to get tea, Elizabeth sees her chance, thinking, "It's my time," and reaching for the strange item. From her basket, Elizabeth's tiny hand emits a powerful blue glow as she uses her magic. A brilliant purple light shoots from the object directly into a shocked Elizabeth's mind. The light fades, revealing a patterned cloth that Adelina now holds, confusedly wondering what it is. Adelina silently picks up Elizabeth's basket and carries her out of the room. The returning maid watches them leave, wondering what just happened. A vision reveals a flower being mixed into tea, a simple process with a hidden purpose. In a flashback, a cloaked figure masterminds a plot to infiltrate the Walzer household by threatening the new maid about her daughter. Elizabeth recalls from her past life's research that a small dose of the flower is medicinal. However, she also remembers the terrifying truth. A large dose transforms the flower into a deadly poison. Back in the present, Elizabeth watches her mother from the basket, worriedly wondering if the poisoning is happening now. The nervous new maid enters the room, announcing she has brought the tea. As Adelina absent-mindedly tells the maid where to set the tea, Elizabeth eyes the newcomer with growing suspicion. Elizabeth observes the maid's sickly complexion, hidden beneath a tense smile. A horrifying thought strikes Elizabeth as she realizes the vision she saw might have been a memory of something that already occurred. She tries to dismiss it as a dream, but can't shake the feeling of dread as she watches her mother. As Adelina raises the teacup to her lips, she calmly wonders if there's a poisonous flower in the tea, while Elizabeth watches in horror. With grim resolve, Elizabeth closes her eyes, deciding to use a clone to intervene. An attendant interrupts, announcing it is time to change clothes, surprising a distracted Adelina. Elizabeth's suspicious gaze on the maid is broken by the sight of an unknown man's formal shoes. A blonde-haired man in a fine suit is now carrying her basket, with the nervous maid following behind. The blonde man swiftly reaches out to take the basket. He firmly takes the basket, leaving the maid watching helplessly. The maid makes a desperate attempt to grab the basket back from him. The blonde man calmly begins to speak, explaining his reasoning. He reveals his simple yet chilling purpose, serving some tea. The maid's face contorts in absolute terror at his words. She stammers that she has already served the tea, as Elizabeth listens from the basket. Elizabeth's eyes widen slightly as she processes the maid's terrified confession. As a sinister aura surrounds them, the man coolly asks, "Is that so?" The man's eyes glow menacingly as he gives the maid a chilling order to take some rest. A cruel, knowing smile spreads across his lips. A dark energy strikes the maid, and a bright red splash of blood appears on her white apron. She holds the basket, stunned and wounded by the sudden, invisible attack. Blood spills from the maid's mouth as her eyes widen in shock and pain. Elizabeth stares from her basket in abject terror, realizing the true nature of this man. The blond man gazes down with a cold, ruthless expression as a horrifying thought begins to form in Elizabeth's mind. Elsewhere, Michael and Julius walk together down a long, ornate palace hallway. Julius hesitantly calls out to his father, trying to bring up the subject of Elizabeth. Michael turns to his son and acknowledges him with a simple, "Yeah." As they continue to walk, Michael seems to question a phrase Julius just used about having come to terms. The scene is violently cut short by a sudden splash of blood and a shocked, questioning gaze. A strange sensation overcomes Michael, who grimly decides they must return as Julius looks on in confusion. A promotional page advertises job openings for translators, proofreaders, and editors for the series. In a shocking flashback, a blond man stands over a bleeding maid, holding a basket containing a terrified Elizabeth. A disembodied voice screams in confusion as the blond man coldly looks down, dismissing the fallen woman as foolish. The blond man's expression remains calm and detached, hinting at his cold nature. The bleeding maid weakly reaches for the man's leg, trying to protect her lady. As the maid clings to his leg, a young boy with light brown hair looks on with rage, shouting at the man. With a brutal kick, the man sends the maid flying and calmly walks away from the scene. Terrified from within her basket, Elizabeth silently pleads for the horrific scene to stop. Wah! Her silent plea turns into a terrified internal scream. Suddenly, a flash of blue light erupts as someone intervenes with blinding speed. As Elizabeth's basket tumbles through the air, a hand reaches out to save her. The basket lands safely in the arms of the loyal maid, who catches her just in time. A glowing blue light emanates from Michael's leg as Julius rushes to his side. As Julius questions the brilliant light, Michael realizes his suspicions were correct. The blond man lies defeated on the floor as the pink-haired baby peeks from her basket, now safely with her maid. Her eyes wide with horror, Elizabeth's mind is consumed by the sight of so much blood. A voice, presumably Michael's, orders Julius to take Elizabeth to safety. Julius takes Elizabeth while Michael kneels beside the fallen attacker, his expression hardening with cold fury. The defeated attacker wonders if he was poisoned, while Michael speculates that suicide is a strong possibility. Holding his baby sister, Julius speaks her name with gentle concern. Michael then takes a quiet Elizabeth from his son's arms. Hic! A small hiccup escapes Elizabeth as tears well in her eyes. Her green eyes filled with tears, Elizabeth begins to cry. Wah! The delayed shock finally hits, and Elizabeth lets out a heart-wrenching wail. At that moment, as Julius holds his crying sister, he looks down with a soft, understanding gaze. He recalls being too young to fully comprehend the terrifying event unfolding before him. He remembers feeling helpless and scared as knights tended to the attacker on the floor. All he could do was cry, just like his baby sister wailing in their father's arms. After the ordeal, Michael holds his daughter, who now sleeps peacefully in her basket. Julius connects the strange feeling from the mansion to this memory, recalling how his father simply noted that Elizabeth had cried. He thinks with concern that it's the first time he's ever seen her cry so hard. Just as Michael worries about how scared Elizabeth must have been, a guard rushes in to report that Lady Adelina is safe. Michael calmly accepts the news, while in the background, a man announces that the attacker's bleeding has stopped. A guard reveals a single pink flower, explaining it was found on the woman. Michael's eyes glow with a menacing green light as he glares with silent, cold fury. Michael decides to keep the flower as a man named Roger calls out to him. As his father deals with the aftermath, Julius quietly calls out to him. Michael turns and firmly orders more guards to be assigned to Adelina. Julius smiles, relieved that he can now return to the academy with peace of mind. His expression darkens as Michael begins to issue a chilling warning. You will regret making an enemy of the Walter family, he vows, his sinister glare a stark contrast to Julius's innocent smile. When she finally awakens, the memory of that day fades. Elizabeth recalls her mother Adelina's appointment ceremony, which has now concluded. Adelina smiles radiantly in an elegant gown, celebrated by the applauding crowd. Adelina senses Elizabeth is awake, while Julius notices his father's attention has shifted. Michael gently tells a squirming Elizabeth to calm down, and she immediately settles with a happy look. He pulls her into a warm embrace and she snuggles against him, feeling safe and content. As the family stands together, they are watched by the attendees of the ceremony. When guests gossip about the battlefield demon doting on his daughter, Michael silences them with a single, terrifying glare, causing them to shrink back in fear. As Michael holds Elizabeth in the background, a somber Adelina resolves that now is not the time to be scared. Clutching her father's clothes, a nervous Elizabeth sweats, her eyes wide with lingering fear. A promotional banner is displayed, advertising the series and hiring staff. The wounded brown-haired maid sleeps peacefully in a lavish bed before her eyes slowly flutter open. Now fully awake, the maid sits up in bed, looking around the unfamiliar room. Two men stand by her bedside, one asking if she's awake, while the other wonders if she's alive. GHK, the maid gasps in panic, jolting upright and desperately trying to call for help for her ladyship. A brown-haired man gently restrains her, assuring her that the commander's daughter is safe, leaving the maid to stammer in confusion. Overwhelmed with emotion, the maid weeps with relief, overjoyed that Elizabeth is safe. Now wearing glasses, the maid rests peacefully as the two men continue to watch over her. Holding a cloth with a flower design, Michael reports they found nothing at the palace and questions the motive of the maid. Michael praises the man he's speaking to, who internally notes the maid's claim about putting something in the tea. With a slight smile, Elizabeth realizes the maid's confession about the poison was a lie. Elizabeth stands alone in her frilly dress, looking thoughtful. Michael holds a sleeping Elizabeth, relieved she's alive and contemplating a review of the magical contracts on their servants. A worried Julius asks his father about the fate of the intruder. Snuggling against her father, Elizabeth thinks she's glad everything worked out, but her relief is short-lived as she senses something is wrong. In a tense flashback, a furious Adelina shouts, questioning why Elizabeth was brought to her office. Julius tries to calm his mother as he holds a crying Elizabeth, but Adelina angrily questions how she could possibly be calm. A hand reaches for Elizabeth, taking her from a shocked Julius, who notes the person apparently dislikes him. A montage shows Michael taking Elizabeth from Julius and later feeding her a bottle with a gentle expression. Adelina stares ahead with a cold, unyielding gaze, her arms crossed defiantly. As the family stands together, a ghostly figure reveals that it was they who orchestrated the recent events. The figure is revealed to be a blonde woman, Queen Claudia, as a horrifying vision shows someone being executed by guillotine. Elizabeth clutches her bottle in terror, her mind flashing back to Adelina's menacing eye. Queen Claudia appears, and a shocked Elizabeth realizes she hasn't changed at all. Elizabeth calms herself, remembering that she is now Elizabeth, not Liz, as she finds comfort in her father's arms. Queen Claudia greets Adelina as the first queen and asks if she is ready for the evening ball. With a concerned expression, the queen explains she rushed over as soon as she heard about the incident. Adelina remains silent and composed as the queen continues to speak. The queen's gaze falls upon the family as she mentions hearing a servant tried to kidnap the commander's daughter. Waving her fan, Adelina coolly dismisses the queen's concern, noting that the guest rooms are the second queen's responsibility. Queen Claudia hides a sly smile behind her fan, seemingly pleased by Adelina's words. She continues to smile, sensing a powerful presence in the room. A mysterious, glowing figure bows deeply before Michael and Elizabeth. Elizabeth feels a distinctly strange and unsettling vibe emanating from the first queen. Adelina sighs, then coldly tells the queen that as a friend, she should understand her only concern is for the Vulture heir. Peeking from behind her father, Elizabeth watches the tense exchange between her mother and the queen. Michael and Julius watch the interaction with expressions of unease and concern. Queen Claudia maintains her sweet, unreadable smile from behind her fan. The intense gazes of Adelina and Queen Claudia meet in a silent, icy standoff. Elizabeth wonders if the bad vibe from Queen Claudia has vanished, just as the Queen begins to speak. Queen Claudia now stands beside a dark-haired man in a formal suit. Adelina formally thanks the Queen for her help, while internally lamenting that her own mother despises her. Elizabeth feels a pang of disappointment, believing her mother has just pushed the first queen away. Peeking from her father's cloak, Elizabeth silently objects with a determined number. In a flashback, a different blonde queen in a striking red gown stands with her 2 maids and a young girl. The queen in red gives an order to one of her maids, who bows her head and agrees to make the arrangements. The queen gently adjusts the hair of the young girl standing before her. The queen's eye reflects Michael holding Elizabeth, hinting at a deeper connection or observation. The blonde queen in the red dress calmly orders her dark-haired maid to send a message to the head court mage. In a chilling internal monologue, the queen decides she will tell Liz about the special present she has prepared for her. Want to work for the best in the business? We are looking for talented individuals to join our team. Do you have what it takes? Visit our website to apply. Elizabeth lies alone on her back in the center of a large, ornate blue rug. With grunts of effort, Elizabeth struggles and finally manages to roll over onto her stomach. She celebrates her newfound ability to roll over easily and realizes she has more physical control, reaching out with a tiny hand. Triumphantly holding her bottle by herself for the first time, Elizabeth is amazed by how fast she's growing up. Her thoughts flash back to the glowing, patterned cloth she saw in her mother's office. As she drinks from her bottle, Elizabeth has a stunning realization. The vision she saw was a glimpse of the future. A brown-haired maid pushes Elizabeth in an elegant golden carriage through a beautiful, sunlit garden. The maid tearfully tells Elizabeth how glad she is that she's safe and how grateful she is to those who saved her. Elizabeth recalls that her father made a special exception to permit healing magic to be used on the injured maid. She remembers the maid being praised for her bravery, but still feels a sense of unease about the incident. The brown-haired maid gives Elizabeth a warm and gentle smile. Elizabeth's eyes widen with sudden, sparkling realization. She thinks back to her Operation Get Along with Dad, looking pleased with herself. Julius suddenly appears in formal attire, surprising Elizabeth and the maid. Julius enters his father's study, explaining he was summoned, as Michael sits at his desk stamping a document. Michael looks up from his work with a serious expression, his task complete. Michael informs a determined-looking Julius that his swordsmanship instruction will resume the following day. Julius agrees to return to the academy, but his expression turns sad as he watches a maid carrying Elizabeth in the hall. Michael tells his son that Adelina must have her own reasons for her current behavior. With a heavy heart, Julius lowers his head and says that he understands. His gaze softens as he watches his smiling baby sister, a wistful look in his eyes. Michael watches his children leave, reflecting that Adelina managed her trauma during Julius's childhood but is struggling now with Elizabeth. He sadly recalls a blue-haired woman named Nausea, wondering if even she should keep her distance from Adelina for now. As Julius and the maid depart with Elizabeth, Michael turns back to his desk and begins to write. An attendant announces the arrival of a messenger from the royal palace, and Michael agrees to receive him. Elizabeth's eyes sparkle with intense curiosity at the news. Now being held by Julius, Elizabeth wonders if the messenger brings news about the attack on her mother. Elizabeth's curiosity grows, and she looks on with an eager expression. Julius glances down at her and gently asks her to be still for now, while Elizabeth lets out a cry of terror as the menacing green-eyed face of a demon-like figure looms over her. Julius excuses himself and carries a babbling Elizabeth away as his father watches them go. In another room, Michael meets with 2 men, including the blonde man from the previous incident, and sternly asks for their report. Julius watches over Elizabeth as she sleeps soundly in her cradle. Poof! A blue-haired maid suddenly appears in a swirl of magic, startling Julius. Julius questions the blue-haired maid, who admits she wanted to hear what his father and the others were discussing. The maid looks at him pointedly, asking with a sharp gaze if he is unable to foresee such things. Julius somberly reflects that the future he knows is limited, coming only from the memories of Liz the commoner. The maid assures a dejected Julius that she's not blaming him, but results are what matter, prompting him to apologize. Julius leans sorrowfully on the railing of a balcony, looking downcast. He resolves to intensify his sword practice, a decision that seems to confuse the watching maid. The maid thinks to herself that while he excels at everything else, swordsmanship is the one thing Julius struggles with at the academy. Filled with grim resolve, Julius vows to try harder so he can become strong enough to protect everyone. The blue-haired maid makes an impassioned plea, asking Julius to take her to the academy with him. Glowing with earnest determination, the maid declares that she, too, wants to protect her family. Her face softens into a warm, resolute smile. Julius looks intently at the blue-haired maid and asks a shocking question. What happened to the real Elizabeth? A promotional page for the series is displayed, advertising open positions for translators, proofreaders, and editors.